The desert wind howled across the rocky canyon as Sarah Running Bear pressed herself against the cold stone wall. Her heart pounded like thunder in her chest. She could hear the horses getting closer, their hooves clicking against the hard ground. The white men had been chasing her for 3 days now, ever since she escaped from the reservation. Sarah was not like other Apache women. She had learned to read and write at the mission school before her family took her back to the tribe. She spoke both Apache and English perfectly. But, most importantly, she knew the old ways, the secret paths through the desert, how to find water where others saw only death, and how to move like a shadow across the land. The men hunting her were led by Captain Morris, a cruel man who believed all Apache people should be locked away forever. He had burned her village 2 months ago, killed her brother, and taken the survivors to the government reservation. But Sarah had escaped that night, slipping away like smoke in the darkness. Now she was running toward the one place she thought might be safe, the ranch of a man named Thomas McKenna. The Apache elders whispered stories about this rancher. They said he was different from other white men. He had never harmed any Apache people, and some said he had even helped a few escape north to safety. Sarah had never seen McKenna, but she had heard he was a giant of a man with silver hair and kind eyes. The Apache children called him White Eagle because he seemed to soar above the hatred that poisoned the hearts of so many others in this harsh land. As the sun began to set, painting the sky red like spilled blood, Sarah saw the ranch in the distance. It was larger than she expected, with a big wooden house, several barns, and corrals filled with horses. Smoke rose from the chimney, and warm yellow light glowed in the windows. But her relief quickly turned to fear. Captain Morris and his men had seen the ranch too, and they were riding hard to cut off her escape. Sarah ran faster than she ever had before, her feet flying over the rough ground. Thorns tore at her clothes and rocks cut her bare feet, but she did not slow down. She reached the ranch fence just as the soldiers surrounded her. There was nowhere left to run. Captain Morris rode up on his big black horse, his face twisted with cruel satisfaction. "Well, well," he said, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "Looks like our little rabbit has run out of holes to hide in." Sarah lifted her chin proudly. She would not show fear to this man, even though her hands were shaking. "I am not a rabbit," she said in clear English. "I am Apache. I am free." Captain Morris laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Not anymore, you're not. You're going back to the reservation, and, this time, you'll stay there." Just then, the front door of the ranch house opened. A tall man stepped out onto the wooden porch. Even in the fading light, Sarah could see he was exactly as the elders had described, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and carrying himself with quiet strength. Thomas McKenna walked slowly toward them, his boots making soft sounds on the hard-packed earth. He was not wearing a gun, which surprised Sarah. Every white man she had ever seen carried weapons. "Evening, Captain," McKenna said, his voice calm and steady. "What brings you to my land so late in the day?" Captain Morris straightened in his saddle, trying to look important. "Official business, McKenna. We're tracking an escaped Apache. Dangerous criminal. We've got her cornered now." McKenna's gray eyes moved to Sarah. For a moment, their gazes met, and Sarah felt something she had not felt in a long time, hope. There was no hatred in this man's eyes, no cruelty. Only curiosity and something that might have been compassion. "This young woman doesn't look very dangerous to me," McKenna said quietly. "She looks tired and scared." "Don't let her fool you," Captain Morris snapped. "These Apache are all the same violent savages who can't be trusted. She'll cut your throat as soon as look at you." Sarah felt anger rise in her chest like fire. She wanted to shout that it was men like Morris who were the real savages, men who burned villages and killed children. But she stayed silent, watching McKenna's face. The rancher studied her for a long moment. "What's your name?" he asked her. "Sarah Running Bear," she answered, proud of her voice for not shaking. "And why were you running, Sarah Running Bear?" Before she could answer, Captain Morris interrupted. "It doesn't matter why. She's government property now. All Apache belong on the reservation, by law. McKenna turned to face the captain, and Sarah saw his jaw tighten. "Property," he said, and now there was steel in his quiet voice. "Did you just call a human being property?" "That's what they are," Morris said. "The government has decided that all Apache must be contained for the safety of decent folks. This one escaped, and now she's going back where she belongs." Sarah watched as McKenna took a step closer to Morris's horse. The rancher was tall enough that even with Morris on horseback, they were almost eye to eye. "Captain," McKenna said, "you're on my land now. My property runs from that ridge to the river, and everything in between belongs to me. That includes this young woman, as long as she's standing on my soil." Morris's face turned red with anger. "You can't interfere with official government business." "I'm not interfering with anything," McKenna replied calmly. "I'm simply exercising my rights as a property owner. If you want to take someone from my land, you'll need to show me the proper paperwork. Court orders, legal documents, that sort of thing." Sarah held her breath. She could see Morris's hand moving toward his gun, and she knew the captain was angry enough to use it. But McKenna seemed completely unafraid. "I don't need paperwork to deal with Apache criminals," Morris snarled. "Actually, you do," McKenna said. "See, I know the law pretty well, Captain. And I know that even Apache people have certain rights under territorial law. They can't just be taken without proper legal process." This was not true, and all three of them knew it. Apache people had very few rights that white authorities respected. But McKenna spoke with such confidence that Morris hesitated. "You're making a big mistake, McKenna," the captain warned. "Important people in the territorial government won't like this." McKenna smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "Captain, I supply horses to the cavalry, beef to the army posts, and grain to the Indian Bureau. I pay more in taxes than most small towns." "Those important people you're talking about? They need me a lot more than I need them." Sarah realized what McKenna was doing. He was not just being kind, he was being smart. He had power that came from money and connections, and he was using that power to protect her. It was a kind of strength she had never seen before. Morris looked around at his men, clearly unsure what to do. He had expected to simply grab Sarah and ride away. He had not expected to face a man who could challenge him with words instead of guns. "This isn't over," Morris finally said. "I'll be back with proper papers." "You do that," McKenna replied. "But make sure they're legal papers, signed by a real judge. I won't accept anything less." As the soldiers rode away into the growing darkness, Sarah felt her legs give out. She sank to her knees, overwhelmed by exhaustion and relief. She had been running for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be safe. McKenna walked over to her, but he was careful to keep some distance between them. He seemed to understand that she might still be frightened. "You're safe now," he said gently. "They're gone." Sarah looked up at him, the strange white man who had just risked his own safety to help her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you help me?" McKenna was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars that were beginning to appear in the dark sky. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I know what it's like to run from something that wants to destroy you." He turned and walked back toward the house, pausing at the porch steps. "You're welcome to sleep in the barn tonight if you want. There's fresh hay, and it's warm. In the morning, we can talk about what happens next." As Sarah watched him disappear into the house, she realized that her life had just changed in ways she could not yet understand. She had expected to find shelter at this ranch, maybe food and water before continuing her journey north. She had not expected to find a man who would stand up to the United States cavalry for a stranger. She had not expected to find someone who would risk everything to do what was right. But, as she made her way to the barn, she wondered what price both of them would have to pay for his kindness. In this harsh land, goodness was often punished more severely than cruelty. The barn was indeed warm, filled with the good smells of hay and horses. Sarah found a corner where she could see the door but stay hidden in the shadows. As she settled down to rest, she heard the sound of McKenna's boots on the porch, walking back and forth. He was keeping watch, she realized. This man who barely knew her was staying awake to make sure she was safe. Sarah closed her eyes, but sleep would not come easily. Too many questions filled her mind. Who was Thomas McKenna really? What had he meant when he said he knew what it was like to run from something that wanted to destroy you? And, most importantly, what would happen when Captain Morris returned, as they both knew he would? Sarah woke to the sound of chickens clucking and the distant lowing of cattle. For a moment, she forgot where she was, and panic seized her chest. Then, she remembered the ranch, the kind rancher, the soldiers riding away in defeat. She was safe, at least for now. Sunlight streamed through the cracks in the barn walls, creating golden lines across the hay-strewn floor. Sarah could smell coffee brewing and bacon cooking somewhere nearby. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she had not eaten anything but wild berries and roots for 3 days. She stood carefully, brushing hay from her torn dress. Through a gap in the barn wall, she could see McKenna moving around in the yard, feeding horses and checking water troughs. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who belonged to this land, who had made it his own through years of hard work. Sarah was about to leave the barn when she heard voices approaching. She quickly ducked back into the shadows, her heart racing. Had Captain Morris returned already? But the voice she heard was not Morris. It was a woman, speaking with a slight Mexican accent. "Thomas, you're playing with fire," the woman said. "That girl in your barn, do you know what kind of trouble she could bring?" McKenna's voice was calm as always. "Good morning to you too, Elena. And, yes, I know exactly what kind of trouble she could bring." Sarah peered through the crack and saw a middle-aged Mexican woman with graying hair and work-worn hands. She was carrying a basket of fresh bread and looked like she belonged on the ranch. "Then, why?" Elena asked. "Why risk everything for a stranger?" McKenna stopped what he was doing and looked at his friend. Elena had been his housekeeper and cook for 15 years, ever since his wife died. She was more like family than an employee, and she was one of the few people who could speak to him this directly. "You remember why I came to this territory, Elena?" he asked quietly. "Of course I remember. You were running from your brother's death. From the guilt." Sarah's ears pricked up. So McKenna did have secrets, just as she had suspected. "My brother died because good men did nothing," McKenna continued. "Because when the mob came for him, everyone who could have helped just looked the other way. They were afraid, or they thought it wasn't their business, or they told themselves that someone else would step in." Elena sighed. "That was different, Thomas. Your brother was white, and he was family." "Was it different?" McKenna asked. "A man was going to be killed by people who had no right to kill him. I see a woman being hunted by people who have no right to hunt her." "How is that different?" Sarah felt her chest tighten. She knew about mobs and lynchings. She had heard the stories from other tribes, about Apache men hanged from trees for crimes they did not commit, about entire families murdered by angry white settlers. Elena shook her head. "Because this time, you could end up dead too. Or worse, they could take your ranch, everything you've built. Captain Morris has powerful friends in the territorial government." "Let them try," McKenna said, and there was iron in his voice now. "I own this land legal and proper. I pay my taxes. I employ half the men in town. They need me more than I need them." "Money and influence won't protect you if they decide you're an Indian lover," Elena warned. "You know what happened to the Carter family last year." Sarah did not know the Carter family story, but she could guess. She had seen what happened to white people who showed kindness to Apache. Their barns burned down. Their cattle disappeared. Sometimes they just vanished one night, never to be seen again. "The girl can't stay here," Elena continued. "It's not safe for her, and it's not safe for you." "I know," McKenna admitted. "But I can't just turn her over to Morris. You've seen what those reservation camps are like. People dying of disease, not enough food, children crying for parents who'll never come home. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the horrors of the reservation. The government called them schools and training centers, but they were really just prisons. Apache people were forbidden to speak their own language, practice their own religion, or teach their children the old ways.
So what's your plan? Elena asked. McKenna was quiet for a long moment. I'm working on it. After Elena went back to the house, Sarah waited a few more minutes before stepping out of the barn.
McKenna was mending a fence nearby, his strong hands working steadily with wire and pliers. "Morning," he said without looking up.
Elena left some breakfast on the porch if you're hungry. Sarah walked over to where he was working.
"I heard what you said about your brother."
McKenna's hands paused in their work. Did you now? You don't have to tell me the whole story, Sarah said. But I want you to know I understand about good men doing nothing. I've seen it too.
McKenna straightened up and looked at her. In the morning light, Sarah could see that his gray eyes held old pain, the kind that never fully heals. "My brother James was a doctor back in Missouri," McKenna said slowly. "He treated everyone who came to him, white folks, freed slaves, Indians, didn't matter.
During the war, he helped slaves escape north on the Underground Railroad." Sarah nodded, encouraging him to continue. "After the war ended, things got ugly.
Some men in town decided James was a traitor for helping escaped slaves. They formed a mob, came to his house one night."
McKenna's voice grew quieter.
"They dragged him out, beat him, and hanged him from the old oak tree by the church."
"Where were you?" Sarah asked gently.
"In California, mining for gold," McKenna said bitterly. "By the time I got word and rode back, he was already dead and buried. The sheriff said it was frontier justice and refused to investigate. The men who did it were walking around town like heroes."
"So you came here?"
"So I came here," McKenna confirmed. "Sold everything back home, bought this land, and tried to build something good out of all that ugliness. But I swore I'd never again let fear stop me from doing what's right."
Sarah studied his face, seeing the determination there. "Captain Morris will come back. You know that."
"I'm counting on it," McKenna said. "But this time, I'll be ready for him."
"What do you mean?"
Before McKenna could answer, they heard the sound of approaching horses. But these were not cavalry horses, the hoofbeats were different, slower and more relaxed.
A moment later, 3 men rode into the yard.
Sarah recognized them immediately as cowboys from the way they sat their horses and wore their hats.
But these were not ordinary ranch hands.
The man in front was tall and lean, with dark skin and intelligent eyes. The second was shorter and stockier, with red hair and freckles. The third was a giant of a man, even bigger than McKenna, with arms like tree trunks. "Morning, boss," the dark-skinned man said as he dismounted.
"We got your message." McKenna nodded. "Thanks for coming so quickly. Sarah, I'd like you to meet my foreman, Samuel Jackson."
"That's Patrick O'Brien, and the big fellow there is William Strong Bear."
Sarah's eyes widened. "Strong Bear? You're Apache?"
The giant man smiled, and his whole face transformed. "Half Apache, half Irish," he said in perfect English.
"My father was a trapper who married my mother's sister.
I learned to live in both worlds.
William has been working for me for 8 years, McKenna explained. Best horseman I've ever seen.
Samuel fought in the war, he knows about strategy and tactics. And Patrick, well, Patrick knows every legal trick in the book. His father was a lawyer."
Sarah began to understand.
These were not just employees, they were McKenna's allies, his chosen family. And each of them had reasons to distrust the kind of authority that Captain Morris represented. "We heard about your visitor last night," Samuel said.
"Word travels fast in a small territory."
"Morris has been bragging all over town about how he's going to teach you a lesson," Patrick added. "He's gathering support from some of the other ranchers, telling them you're harboring dangerous criminals." "He's also sent a telegram to the territorial governor," William said quietly.
"Asking for official backing to come take the girl by force." McKenna nodded grimly. How long do we have? Day or two at most, Samuel replied.
But, boss, you sure about this?
Once we cross this line, there's no going back. McKenna looked at Sarah, then, at each of his men. I'm sure. The question is, are you with me? Samuel grinned. I've been waiting years for a fight worth having. Patrick laughed. My grandfather was in the Irish Republican Army.
He'd roll over in his grave if I backed down from a fight for freedom.
William just nodded. The Apache are my people too. If you're willing to stand with them, then I'm willing to stand with you.
Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so long running and hiding, feeling like the whole world was against her people. Now she was surrounded by men who were willing to risk everything to protect her.
What's the plan? She asked.
McKenna smiled, and, for the first time since she'd met him, it was not a gentle smile.
It was the smile of a man who was about to fight back.
The plan, he said, is to show Captain Morris and his friends that there are different kinds of power in this world. They have uniforms and badges and government backing.
But we have something they don't. What's that? Sarah asked.
We have the truth on our side, McKenna said. And we have people who know this land better than any government man ever will.
Over the next hour, the men outlined their strategy.
It was audacious and dangerous, but it might just work.
Sarah found herself impressed by McKenna's thinking. He was not just good and brave, he was smart.
The plan would require her to do something that terrified her, trust these white men completely with her life and her freedom. But, as she looked around at their faces, she realized she had no choice. More than that, she realized she wanted to fight back. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting cruel men like Captain Morris decide her fate. There's something you should know, she told them.
I'm not just any Apache woman. My father was a war chief. My brother was a medicine man.
If word gets out that you're protecting me, it won't just be Captain Morris you're fighting.
Who else? McKenna asked.
Every Apache hater in the territory, Sarah said. Every settler who's lost family in the Indian Wars. Every politician who's made his career by promising to solve the Indian problem.
They'll come for you with everything they have.
McKenna looked around at his men, and she saw them all nod. Then, we'd better make sure our plan works the first time, he said.
Because we're not going to get a second chance.
2 days later, Sarah stood at the window of McKenna's ranch house, watching the dust cloud on the horizon grow larger. Captain Morris was returning, just as they had all known he would. But, this time, he was not alone.
Through McKenna's telescope, Sarah could count at least 20 men riding toward the ranch.
Some wore cavalry uniforms, but others were civilians, ranchers, shopkeepers, and drifters who had been promised easy money for helping capture a dangerous Apache criminal. They're flying an official flag, Samuel reported from the porch. Morris wants this to look legal and proper. McKenna stood beside Sarah, calm as still water.
Let him have his show. We're ready.
The past 2 days had been a whirlwind of preparation.
McKenna had sent messages to influential friends in the territorial capital.
Patrick had spent hours writing legal documents. William had ridden out to contact other Apache families hidden in the desert, spreading word of what was happening. And Samuel had done something that surprised everyone. He had written to his old army contacts, including a general who owed him a favor from the war. But the most important part of their plan depended on Sarah herself. It was risky, and it required her to do something that went against every instinct she had developed during her years of hiding and running.
You remember what you need to do? McKenna asked her quietly. Sarah nodded. I remember.
But, Thomas, if this goes wrong.
It won't go wrong, he said firmly. Trust the plan. Trust your friends. The word friends sent a warm feeling through Sarah's chest. When had she last had friends? When had she last been part of something bigger than just her own survival?
Elena came bustling in from the kitchen, carrying a silver tray with coffee and cups.
If we're going to have visitors, she said grimly, we might as well be civilized about it.
Outside, the riders were drawing closer. Sarah could see Captain Morris at the front, his face set in hard lines. Beside him rode a man she didn't recognize, older, wearing an expensive suit despite the dust and heat of the desert.
That's Territorial Judge Harrison, Patrick said, studying the group through the telescope.
Morris brought himself some official backing this time.
Good, McKenna said, surprising everyone.
The more official this gets, the better our plan works. When the riders reached the yard, they spread out in a semicircle facing the ranch house. It was clearly meant to be intimidating, 20 armed men against the handful of people in the house. Captain Morris dismounted and walked toward the porch, the judge beside him.
2 soldiers followed, carrying official-looking papers. McKenna! Morris called out.
By order of Territorial Judge Harrison, you are commanded to surrender the Apache fugitive Sarah Running Bear immediately.
McKenna stepped out onto the porch, Elena beside him with her coffee tray. Good afternoon, Captain.
Judge Harrison.
You gentlemen look tired from your ride. Would you care for some coffee?
Judge Harrison was a thin man with gray whiskers and small, sharp eyes.
He looked annoyed by McKenna's casual manner.
This is not a social call, McKenna, the judge said stiffly.
We are here on official business.
The woman you're harboring is wanted for questioning in connection with several crimes.
What crimes? McKenna asked mildly. Morris spoke up quickly.
Theft of government property, inciting rebellion among the Apache, and conspiracy to commit violence against United States citizens.
McKenna raised an eyebrow.
Those are serious charges.
Do you have any evidence? We don't need evidence for questioning, Morris snapped. Apache criminals don't get the same legal protections as decent folks.
This was exactly what McKenna had been hoping Morris would say. He smiled slightly.
Actually, Captain, they do.
According to the Indian Appropriations Act of 1871, all Native Americans are considered persons under the jurisdiction of the United States for legal purposes. They have the right to due process, just like any other person.
Judge Harrison looked uncomfortable. That's a very technical interpretation of the law.
It's the law, Patrick O'Brien said, stepping onto the porch with a folder full of documents. I've brought copies of the relevant statutes, if you'd like to review them, Your Honor. Sarah watched from the window, amazed by how smoothly McKenna and his men were handling this confrontation. They were using the law itself as a weapon, turning the legal system against men who were used to ignoring it when dealing with Apache people.
Look here, Judge Harrison said, clearly irritated. We don't have time for legal technicalities.
The woman is Apache, she escaped from the reservation, and she needs to be returned.
That's all there is to it. Actually, Your Honor, it's not that simple.
This voice came from behind the group of riders.
Everyone turned to see a new horse approaching, a lone rider wearing a clean cavalry uniform with the insignia of a colonel.
He was an older man with white hair and a weathered face, but he carried himself with unmistakable authority.
Captain Morris's face went pale. Colonel Thompson. Sir, I wasn't expecting.
Obviously not, the colonel said dryly as he dismounted. Colonel James Thompson, Territorial Military Command.
I received some very interesting telegrams about this situation. Sarah held her breath.
She had no idea who this man was or whose side he might be on. The colonel walked up to Judge Harrison and handed him an official-looking document.
Judge, this is a federal court order from the District Court in Santa Fe.
It requires you to halt all proceedings against the woman Sarah Running Bear until a proper legal review can be conducted.
Judge Harrison's hands shook slightly as he read the document.
This is highly irregular. What's irregular, Colonel Thompson said loudly enough for everyone to hear, is the reports I've been receiving about Apache people being arrested without charges, held without trial, and transferred to reservations without legal process.
The federal government is very concerned about these violations of due process. Captain Morris stepped forward.
Sir, with respect, the Indian situation requires firm action.
We can't let legal technicalities get in the way of public safety.
Colonel Thompson turned to stare at Morris, and Sarah could see the captain begin to sweat.
Captain, are you suggesting that the United States Army should ignore federal law when it's inconvenient?
No, sir, of course not, but.
Then, you'll follow this court order, just like any other lawful command.
The colonel's voice was steel. The woman stays here until a proper legal hearing can be arranged. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. But she also wondered what had really happened.
How had McKenna arranged for a federal court order? How had he gotten the colonel to intervene?
The answer came when she saw Samuel step out from behind the barn.
He walked over to Colonel Thompson and saluted smartly.
"Good to see you again, sir," Samuel said. The colonel smiled for the first time since arriving.
"Sergeant Jackson. Though I hear it's Foreman Jackson now."
He turned to address the crowd. "This man served under my command during the war. Saved my life at Gettysburg. When he writes to tell me that injustices are being committed in my territory, I pay attention." Sarah began to understand. Samuel had used his military connections, just as Patrick had used his legal knowledge and McKenna had used his political influence. They had built a wall of law and authority that even Captain Morris could not break through. But Morris was not finished fighting. "This is all very nice," he said loudly, "but the fact remains that this woman is dangerous. She's Apache royalty, her father was a war chief. She knows the location of Apache camps throughout the territory. If she's allowed to go free, she could lead raids against innocent settlers." Colonel Thompson looked interested.
"Is that so?"
"Well, then, perhaps we should hear what the woman herself has to say about these accusations." This was the moment Sarah had been dreading and preparing for.
Everything depended on what happened next.
She walked out onto the porch, her head held high. Every eye was on her, and she could feel the hatred radiating from many of the men in the yard. But she also felt the support of her friends behind her. "My name is Sarah Running Bear," she said in clear, strong English. "My father was indeed a war chief, and my brother was a medicine man."
Captain Morris is correct about that.
She heard murmurs from the crowd, and saw some of the men reaching for their weapons. But Colonel Thompson held up a hand for silence. "However," Sarah continued, "Captain Morris is wrong about everything else. I did not escape from the reservation.
I was never properly processed into the reservation system.
When soldiers burned my village 2 months ago, I fled into the desert to save my life." "She's lying," Morris interjected. "All Apache from that area were supposed to be transported to the reservation." "Supposed to be, yes," Sarah agreed. "But I was not there when the soldiers came. I was visiting my aunt's family 3 days right away. When I returned, my village was ashes and my people were gone." Colonel Thompson studied her carefully.
"And what have you been doing since then?"
"Trying to find my surviving family members," Sarah said.
"Trying to learn what happened to my people."
"And trying to avoid being captured by men who want to imprison me for the crime of being born Apache." She turned to face Captain Morris directly. "This man claims I am dangerous, that I know the locations of Apache camps. But look around you, Colonel Thompson.
If I knew where Apache warriors were hiding, would I be here alone? Would I be seeking help from a white rancher instead of joining my own people?"
It was a good point, and Sarah could see that it was having an effect on some of the men. "Furthermore," she continued, "Captain Morris claims I have committed crimes. But he has never asked me about these supposed crimes.
He has never investigated them.
He simply decided that because I am Apache, I must be guilty of something." Colonel Thompson nodded slowly. "These are serious allegations, Miss Running Bear."
"Do you have any proof of what you're saying?"
Sarah reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, she withdrew a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "This is a letter from the mission school where I learned to read and write," she said, handing it to the colonel. "It was written by Father Martinez, the priest who ran the school. It states that I was one of his most promising students, that I had never shown any signs of violence or rebellion, and that I was working as a translator for peaceful negotiations between Apache bands and the territorial government. Colonel Thompson read the letter carefully, then handed it to Judge Harrison. The judge's face grew more troubled as he read. "There's more," Sarah said. She pulled out another document. "This is a safe passage letter, signed by General Crook himself 2 years ago. It guarantees my safety as long as I continue to work for peace between my people and the government." The silence in the yard was deafening. Sarah could see Captain Morris's face growing red with anger and embarrassment. "These documents could be forged," Morris said desperately. "They could be," Colonel Thompson agreed. "But they look genuine to me. And, more importantly, they raise serious questions about your conduct, Captain." He turned to address the entire group. "If this woman is indeed a peaceful translator working under General Crook's protection, then attempting to arrest her without proper authority could be considered an act of insubordination." Sarah felt a surge of triumph, but she kept her face calm and dignified. The plan was working perfectly. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. Even if they won this particular battle, there would be others. Men like Captain Morris did not give up easily, and they had long memories for anyone who made them look foolish. The real test would come in the days and weeks ahead, when the official attention had moved on and the local hatred had time to build and fester. For now, though, she was safe. And, more than that, she had learned something important about the power that good people could wield when they worked together. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the confrontation in McKenna's yard, and Sarah Running Bear had discovered that victory could be more complicated than defeat. The legal battle was won. She was officially recognized as a free person under General Crook's protection, working as a translator and cultural liaison. But winning in court did not automatically win hearts and minds. The territory was buzzing with talk about the Apache woman and the Indian lover rancher who protected her. Some people admired McKenna's courage in standing up for what was right. Others whispered that he was a fool who would get everyone killed by encouraging the Apache to think they had rights. Sarah had moved into a small cabin that McKenna built for her near the main ranch house. It was simple but comfortable, with real glass windows and a stone fireplace. After years of sleeping on the ground or in caves, having a real home felt like a miracle. But it came at a price. 3 times in the past month, someone had shot at her cabin in the middle of the night. Once, she found a dead rattlesnake nailed to her door with a note that read, "Go back where you belong." And, just last week, someone had poisoned the well that supplied her cabin, forcing her to walk to the main house for water. McKenna was furious about the attacks, but there was little he could do. The sheriff claimed he was investigating, but no arrests were made. Everyone knew who was behind the harassment, but proving it was another matter. Captain Morris had been quietly transferred to a post in Colorado after his humiliation, but his supporters remained. They had found a new leader in a rancher named Dutch Kellerman, a man who had lost his son in an Apache raid years earlier and blamed all Apache people for his grief. Sarah was chopping firewood behind her cabin when she heard the horses approaching. She recognized the sound immediately, multiple riders, moving fast, trying to stay quiet. This was not a friendly visit. She dropped the axe and ran toward the main house, but the riders cut her off. There were 8 of them, all wearing masks made from flour sacks with eye holes cut out. But Sarah recognized Dutch Kellerman's voice when he spoke. "Well, look what we found," Kellerman said, his voice muffled by the mask. "The famous Apache princess, all alone." Sarah stood perfectly still, calculating her chances. The main house was 100 yards away, too far to reach before the horses caught her. The barn was closer, but they could easily surround it and trap her inside. "What do you want?" she asked, proud that her voice stayed steady. "What do we want?" Kellerman laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "We want you gone, Apache. We want you to take your savage ways and disappear into the desert where you belong." "I have legal protection," Sarah said. General Crook's safe passage letter. "Papers," another writer spat. "Government papers don't mean nothing out here. This is the real world,
or decent folks have to protect themselves from your kind.
Sarah heard footsteps behind her and turned to see McKenna walking out of the barn. He was not running or shouting. He was walking calmly, carrying a pitchfork like he was just doing his normal chores.
"Afternoon, gentlemen," McKenna said pleasantly.
"Beautiful day for a ride."
Kellerman wheeled his horse around to face the rancher. "This doesn't concern you, McKenna. Walk away."
"Well, that's where you're wrong," McKenna said, still walking slowly forward.
"See, this is my land. That woman is my employee and my guest. So anything that happens here concerns me very much."
Sarah noticed that McKenna's other men were emerging from various buildings around the ranch.
Samuel appeared at the corner of the house. Patrick came out of the grain shed. William stepped into view near the corral.
None of them were running or shouting either. They were just taking positions, calm and ready. "There are 8 of us and only 4 of you," Kellerman warned.
"I can count," McKenna replied. "But I'm wondering if you've thought this through completely." "What do you mean?"
McKenna stopped walking and looked up at the masked riders. "Well, first of all, you're on my property without permission.
In territorial law, that's trespassing.
If something happens to you here, I have every right to claim self-defense." "Big talk for a man who's outnumbered," one of the other riders said. "Second," McKenna continued, ignoring the interruption, "you're wearing masks, which suggests you know what you're planning is illegal."
"That means this isn't just trespassing, it's conspiracy to commit a crime." Sarah saw some of the riders shifting nervously in their saddles. McKenna's calm confidence was having an effect.
"Third," McKenna said, "you seem to think this is just about the 4 of us.
But you're forgetting something important." "What's that?" Kellerman demanded. McKenna smiled.
"You're forgetting that Sarah Running Bear has been working as a translator and liaison for the past 3 months. She's been helping Apache families navigate the legal system, find their relatives, and establish their rights under territorial law.
She's become quite well known and respected in certain circles." Sarah wondered what he was getting at.
This was not part of any plan they had discussed.
"So what?" Kellerman said.
"So," McKenna replied, "if something happens to her, it won't just be me you'll have to answer to. It will be every Apache family she's helped. Every territorial official she's worked with. Every federal marshal who knows her name." This was not entirely true, but it was close enough to the truth to be believable.
Sarah had indeed been working as a translator, and she had made friends and allies throughout the territory.
"You're bluffing," Kellerman said, but Sarah could hear the uncertainty in his voice.
"Am I?" McKenna asked.
"Tell me, Dutch, have you heard from your friend Captain Morris lately?"
Kellerman's horse pranced nervously, picking up on its rider's tension.
"Morris was transferred to Colorado," McKenna continued.
"Seems his superiors were not happy about his conduct during the incident at my ranch.
Word is, he's been assigned to desk duty at a supply depot. No more field command, no more authority over Apache affairs."
This was true, and everyone knew it. Morris's humiliation had been the talk of the territory for weeks.
The same thing could happen to any territorial official who's seen as persecuting peaceful Apache people without cause, McKenna said. The federal government is paying attention now, thanks to all the publicity Sarah's case generated. Sarah began to understand what McKenna was doing. He was not just protecting her, he was using her growing reputation and connections as a shield for both of them. Furthermore, McKenna continued, if you harm a hair on her head, you'll be committing a federal crime. Assault on a federal liaison carries serious penalties.
Prison time, not just fines.
This was a complete bluff, but it sounded official enough to give the writers pause. William Strong Bear chose that moment to step forward. "There's something else you should consider," he said in his deep, calm voice.
"What's that, half-breed?" Kellerman snapped.
William's face darkened at the slur, but his voice remained steady.
"If you hurt Sarah Running Bear, you won't just be dealing with white man's law. You'll be dealing with Apache justice." "You threatening us?" one of the writers demanded. I'm informing you, William replied. Sarah's father was War Chief Running Bear. Her clan has many relatives throughout this territory and beyond. If she is harmed, they will consider it an act of war against her family. Sarah's heart raced. William was invoking something very serious, the Apache law of blood vengeance. If a family member was murdered, the entire clan was honor-bound to seek justice.
That's a big responsibility to take on, William continued, killing someone whose death would be avenged by Apache warriors throughout the Southwest. The writers were clearly getting nervous. What had started as a simple intimidation had become a complex web of legal and cultural threats that none of them had anticipated. This is ridiculous, Kellerman said, but Sarah could hear that his resolve was weakening. We're not going to be scared off by legal papers and Indian superstitions. Then, let me make this simple for you, McKenna said, and now his voice had lost its pleasant tone. You have 10 seconds to get off my land. After that, I'm going to start shooting, and I'm going to claim you were here to commit crimes against my employee. You wouldn't dare, Kellerman said. McKenna reached into his coat and pulled out a small pistol. Try me. Samuel, Patrick, and William all produced weapons as well. Suddenly, the odds did not look so favorable for the masked riders. This isn't over, Kellerman warned as he pulled his horse's head around. Yes, it is, McKenna said firmly. It's over because you're going to realize that the old ways of doing things don't work anymore. The territory is changing, Dutch. You can change with it, or you can get left behind. As the riders galloped away, Sarah felt her legs give out. She sat down hard on the ground, overwhelmed by the realization of how close she had come to serious harm. McKenna holstered his pistol and walked over to her. You all right? I think so, Sarah said shakily. But, Thomas, what you said about me being a federal liaison might not be completely true yet, McKenna admitted. But, I've been writing letters, and I think it could become true very soon. Over the next hour, McKenna explained what he had been working on. Using his political connections and Sarah's growing reputation, he had been lobbying the territorial government to create an official position for her as a cultural liaison and translator. The federal government is genuinely concerned about the treatment of Apache people, he told her. There have been too many incidents like the Morris affair, too much bad publicity. They want to show that they're committed to fair treatment and due process. And they think hiring me would prove that? Sarah asked. They think hiring you would be a smart political move, McKenna said. You're educated, you speak both languages perfectly, and you have credibility with both Apache people and white authorities. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about what this would mean. An official government position would give her real protection, real authority. But it would also make her a target for every person who hated the idea of Apache people having any power at all. There's something else, McKenna said. The position would come with an office in the territorial capital, and a house, and a salary that would make you independent. Independent, Sarah repeated. The word felt strange in her mouth. You could stay here on the ranch as long as you want, McKenna said quickly. But, if you took this job, you wouldn't have to stay. You'd have choices. Sarah looked around at the ranch that had become her home, at the friends who had risked everything to protect her. The idea of leaving felt wrong, but the idea of having choices felt wonderful. I'll think about it, she said. That night, Sarah sat by her fireplace, reading the official letters that had arrived about the government position. The salary being offered was more money than she had ever imagined having. The responsibilities sounded challenging but worthwhile, helping Apache families navigate the legal system, translating in legal proceedings, advising territorial officials on Apache customs and concerns. But what excited her most was not the money or the status. It was the possibility of helping other Apache people the way McKenna and his friends had helped her. She thought about her brother, killed in the raid on her village. He had always said that the Apache people's greatest weapon was not their skill with horses or their knowledge of the desert, but their ability to adapt and survive. Maybe survival meant more than just hiding in the desert and avoiding white soldiers. Maybe survival meant learning to use the white man's own laws and institutions to protect her people. There was a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, she found McKenna standing on her porch with a cup of coffee and a serious expression. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what happened today, and about the job offer. And I think you should take the job," he said. "Not because I want you to leave, I don't. But because you could do more good in that position than anyone else they might hire." Sarah invited him in and poured herself a cup of coffee from his pot. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire crackle. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said finally. "Of course. When this all started, when you decided to help me, did you know it would lead to all this? The legal battles, the threats, the federal investigations?" McKenna was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly? I thought you'd stay a day or two, then move on. I thought I was just helping one person for a short time. But now? Now I realize that sometimes helping one person changes everything," he said. "Sometimes standing up for what's right in a small way opens the door to standing up for what's right in a big way." Sarah nodded. "That's what my brother used to say. He said every action creates ripples, like throwing a stone in still water." "Your brother sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Sarah said softly. "And I think he would have liked you." 6 weeks later, Sarah Running Bear stood in the territorial governor's office, taking the oath that would make her the first Apache woman to hold an official position in the territorial government. McKenna was there, along with Samuel, Patrick, and William. Elena had insisted on coming too, wearing her best dress and beaming with pride. In the months that followed, Sarah used her position to help dozens of Apache families reunite with lost relatives, establish legal rights to traditional lands, and navigate the complex web of territorial and federal laws. She never forgot the lesson she learned at McKenna's ranch, that there were different kinds of power in the world, and that sometimes the most effective power came not from weapons or fear, but from courage, friendship, and the simple determination to do what was right. The ranch remained her home base, and McKenna's friendship remained one of the most important things in her life. Together, they had proven that the old hatreds did not have to define the future, and that people of different backgrounds could work together to build something better than what they had inherited. It was not the end of the story. There would be many more challenges, many more battles to fight for justice and understanding. But it was the beginning of a new chapter, one written in hope instead of fear, in cooperation instead of conflict. And sometimes, Sarah thought as she worked late in her government office, helping another Apache family find their way through the legal system, that was enough to change the world.